Hi, everyone. Welcome back.
Yes, welcome. I'm Matt Morton. I'm here today with my colleague, Joanna Grama. We're both part of Vantage's information security practice.
In our last video blog, we talked about NIST Special Publication 800-171 and how that impacts higher education information security programs. In this episode, we're going to talk about what you can do to respond to threats and prioritize your organization's information security activities.
You know, Joanna, this is a great time of year for thinking about responding to those threats. And since the 2021 Verizon data breach investigation report is recently released, it's always a must-read document, for me at least, each year to stay abreast of all the types of incidents and breaches that are impacting whichever industry you're most interested in.
That's right, Matt. And I'm always interested in reading the education services industry breakdown. So, for instance, this year, social engineering, system intrusions, and random errors were the top threats and attack patterns in the education services industry. And as always, the VDBIR gets me thinking about the threats that the education industry faces and how to think about making sure that your own environment can defend against those threats.
You know, that's right, Joanna. Defending against those threats is really important. And there are two key steps that we recommend institutions think about with their own environments. The first is to assess your gaps. Determine your current compliance and security posture against your framework or standard of your choice. And identify any of those issues that could affect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of your most important asset or data. And the second step is to create a plan of action to actually address those gaps, right? Develop that plan and create a multi-year risk-based strategy to improve your campus information security and privacy posture, and then thus reduce your institutional risk in the process.
To support your information security program, you need governance, you need a plan of action, and you need operational activities. And you have to work on all three legs of the stool at the same time, or you don't have a solid program. Most organizations have the three elements in place and are working towards improved program maturity. But that said, we sometimes see that institutions falling short on the operations area when they have governance and a plan in place.
You know, that's not always easy, is it? And the key thing here is good security operations. They're so difficult to support that third leg there to make sure that you've got the items that you need for your program. We like to talk about something called the critical path. And the critical path in project management is a concept that's focused on identifying the key tasks that are to be completed to get to that finish line of the project. And so often we see in security implementation projects, many things getting in the way on the way to that completion. And so we've kind of thought about how do we apply some good project management practices around this to get you to where you need to be to complete what you're doing, especially when it comes to dealing with operational technologies like reviewing SIM data or looking at antivirus data, all those kinds of things that are important and part of the product suites that you have, but don't necessarily get done as quickly as you would like, right? So this example, just briefly here, is just shows you, you have a task, multiple tasks to get to a completion of a particular project. And if you were to do all of these tasks, you would have at least around 15 days of effort. But if you just follow the critical paths, meaning the things that are only necessary for that particular project to complete it and to get it into operation, then you'd only have 9 days. And so you kind of get the idea. This is just a real general idea that you kind of understand.
So Matt, when you talk about critical path in this way, it makes me think about agile development methodologies. And in agile methodologies, they're most often used for software development. The focus is on iterative development. The development team uses a really disciplined project management process to bring all these cross-functional groups together, and they brainstorm requirements, and then they brainstorm solutions development. And from there, the Agile process requires frequent inspection and adaptation, which makes sure that the developers are really able to concentrate on the core functionality required in the software and not anything else. And when it's done well, Agile methodologies are intended to deliver high quality, rapid results.
You're right, Joanna. That's exactly, the model that we'd like to see, right, for security implementation projects, and especially about developing your security operations. And so the critical path, leverages those agile concepts. And then we like to add, right, 7 more key things to help you through that iteration. And this approach is focused on focus and follow through. And essentially, when you have a particular item that you're working through, you want to have, focus. You want to identify your assets and your logs. You want to scan for vulnerabilities, review the logs and reports that come from that tool or whatever it is that you're working with. Secure those assets that are focused with that, or that are identified with that. Remove things. This is the part we always forget, right? Anything that's not needed, accounts or systems not being used, get rid of it. You want to reduce that risk. And then finally, the key thing here, right, is to communicate. Communicate what you've done and communicate how you've done it so that people understand that effort's going on. Now, perfection is always the enemy of progress, right, in these processes. And using this process on your own key security solutions will help you reduce your risk significantly. Now, based upon our observations, there are also some key technologies that we work with here that have the most impact on reducing our clients' risk.
So keeping that in mind, let's talk about some of those technologies. So for instance, I think multi-factor authentication is super important. Not only does it provide a layer of security for access to your systems, but I read a recent article that some cybersecurity insurers are looking to require their insureds have MFA as a condition of the insurance. And so we know that many institutions right now are using some form of MFA for various audiences. Taking a focused and then iterative approach to deployment allows you to deploy your most important allows you to deploy MFA to your most important constituencies in shorter time increments. And this can be helpful in defending against one of the most prominent threat vectors that our institutions are dealing with, which is account compromise and social engineering.
No, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. And another interesting thing too is almost every compromise you see or hear about or read about in the last few years, it always starts with one attack vector, right? And that's always typically phishing. We see we need to have a focus on the network and segmentation, but the email system, right, should be considered as part of the network from a security perspective. And so that means also, if you have good network security but are diminishing, or if you're ignoring the phishing attack vector or minimizing that, right? You could be in for a rude awakening. Many of the breaches that have become public, highlight this fact. I think SolarWinds is the latest example. Again, very impactful breach or issue, right? Security incident, and yet at the same time, it starts with a phishing attack, right? And so. So we put phishing right here as number 2, since of course multi-factor will help protect your email directly in the event of an attack. But there's also some other things you can do to detect phishing. You can deploy, phishing protection software. You can protect your borders using DMARC. Always identify your senders and recipients. Easier said than done, right? With today's world of MailChimp and SurveyMonkey and so forth. But using DKIM to do that with your DMARC and with training, right, is an area of focus, can really bring those iterative improvements that you need as an organization to be more secure.
And so I want to add one. It's not necessarily a technology all on its own, but I think patching your systems and applications continues to be an important security activity that many organizations might be lax about. Patching systems is an important defense in depth activity, and it limits damage to your system if some other control or access control fails. Because the cycle of scanning and patching and testing can be a really large lift, working through this in an iterative fashion, focusing on the most critical or most used systems, or the systems that are most vulnerable to the various top threats, will help you get risk to an acceptable level at your organization or institution.
Yes, that, patching is not fun, right? But it's extremely necessary and probably one of the most critical processes you can have. And then one of the most complex aspects of operational security is if I see too many organizations with lots of procurement going on, but not a lot of thought or strategy around how they are constructing their security technology stack. And so architecture is what I would say maybe be the fourth technology or perhaps process that you would put into place to make sure your operational security is at its top, right? Developing that security architecture will help, creating the correct amount of separation, and ensure you're getting the most value out of your investments, that you're not creating overlap or that people aren't confused. Which alert should I listen to? Because alert fatigue is an issue, and making sure that you have designed what you're after is a key thing that needs to occur.
That's a really great point. So we talked a lot about technical controls today, but I think that, one thing to think about for the future is we should talk about the administrative ones like policy, standards, and procedures. For each of the technical controls that we discussed, there has to be some sort of corresponding documentation about that control.
Great point. So stay tuned, right? Our next one. So let's see. Oh, that's what this slide.
Yeah, so you can just do, and then you've got to move it to the stool
Then
slide for me.
Here, whoops. Then I move it to here. There.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, you ready?
Yes.
Take 3.